Good evening, everyone. I hope I'm audible. Please confirm if I'm audible in your chat box with yes or no. Okay, thank you for responses. We'll be starting webinar in short time. Hello, friends. While we are waiting for starting the webinar, I would like to know if majority of the people of the audience is from finance and tax background. Please type in the chat box. Good to see. While we all know what today topic is, I would like to know the audience is expect what audience is expecting from today's webinar. Please type in your comments in your chat box. Okay, I can see so many comments are coming. Mr. Harish says, get to know in details about ISD and its real-time application. Mr. Shubham asking mismatches in ISD reporting. Mr. Vinay was asking to know about ISD. We'll be covering ISD in a whole topic in the webinar. Nagraj was asking which are expense need to consider for ISD. ISD versus cross charge. Freight invoices, how to handle previously we have handled through cross charge, but we have to route them through ISD. Rakesh Kataria asking how to transfer ITC from ISD to other units. Procedure of ISD and return and invoice format. Glad to see all the responses. If anyone having any questions to ask Mr. Rakela sir, you can type in the chat box and we will take the questions in the end of the webinar. We are getting few more responses also. Mr. Shubham was asking how to deal with those cases where ISD related state one has been mistakenly reported in other state two while filing the return, but ITC has been claimed in state one. We'd love to see how there are more responses. Please, you can chat in the chat box. Good evening, everyone. My name is Pawan Kumar Sahu. I handle product marketing at Websol. I'll be your moderator for the day. Also, my colleague Siddharth will be joining as a moderator with the. Before we start the webinar, I would like to give small introduction of my company that I represent from. I'll try to keep it short. Websol is part of Wipro back in the days. We were in fact the printer manufacturing division of Wipro, and we specialized in the dot matrix printing category. Over the years, the company decided to step out of Wipro and form a separate entity in the name of Web Solutions. Our signature offering managed printing services are carried forward over 2 decades and with evolving needs and changing market trends. We decided to bring whole digital workplace solutions to our portfolio. We expanded our product and service portfolio to cater mass market. Over the years, we have also collaborated with giant markets like Ricoh and Fujifilm. I'd like to explain more milestone about our journey as Web Solutions. We started in 1998 as a Wipro's domestic IT business and partnered with Epson in 1991. We have one of the factory setup in Himalayas, Badi. And we are one of the listed company of Bombay Stock Exchange in 2011. In 2020, we got merger of 3 business units into one. Let us move to next slides where we can talk about some quick company highlights of Websol. Wipro have 20 years of industry experience with 500 enterprise clients in over 2000 plus service locations. We are awarded with one of the DMS solution company of 2022. We are also awarded as 20 most promising DMS solution provider CIO review in 2018.
All right. Thank you, Pawan. So I will take it forward from here on. Good evening, everyone. I am Siddharth. I am your old moderator. For those of you who attended our previous webinars, I'm your regular guy. So I will take it forward from here on. I also see a bunch of responses that are still coming on chat, which is great. Good to see them responses. Audience, as I mentioned earlier, we actually have a great number of audience today. We're almost 60 plus, which is good to see. And I think we'll have a few more joining in. But what I'd like to mention is those of you who are uh, who have mentioned on the chat. I would like to see the same amount of engagement and uh, I should probably mention enthusiasm. Keep it going throughout the webinar because we have polls incoming. We also have a dedicated Q&A session for those of you who attended our previous webinars. Uh, a quick note, a quick question on the side. How many of you are attending our webinar for the first time? You can drop a yes on chat. I'd like to see that while I move to the next slide. Okay, I think Suhasini has raised her hand saying she's the first time attender. Okay, great. Not bad at all. We have a bunch of people who are attending the first time. Interesting. Okay. Wonderful, wonderful. Now, what I'd like to know is how many of you are old timers? How many of you are existing attendees? That would be interesting. Okay, Mr. Dhanaraj. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Now, you know what, audience? I think at this point I'm confused because we have a whole bunch of them who are new and old, and people are raising hands and a lot of yes and no's on chat also. So I like the engagement that we have here. What do you think, Pawan? Good engagement, right? Okay. So let's keep this going, guys. Now, let me quickly talk about the product line that we have. Okay. I will try to keep it short again, and moving forward, we'll introduce the speaker and I will hand it over to him. So, audience, on a side note that I'd like to mention is Web Solutions, as the company is known, we actually underwent a major brand refresh, or in other words, brand transformation. We are now known by the name of WebSol. We have a new identity that we carry, and this is mainly because of market trends. With changing industry trends, right? Every company, every organization will undergo changes, and we have followed the same path. And so, with a new company identity, a new logo, things like that, we also have a renewed product line, product and service, which goes by the name of FluidWorks, as you can see. Why fluid? As you all know, the word fluid basically means it flows, right? So our solutions will be able to take shape based on the user's requirement. That's what the idea is. And we are a fully scalable solution. Now, I will quickly explain what each of these solutions mean, what each of these exactly mean, so that you also understand what it is. Again, I will make sure this is short and concise. So, as I mentioned, FluidWorks, this is our workplace suite. Under this, we have multiple offerings. I will explain what this is. What is Fluid Pro? This is our managed IT infra service solution. Under this, there's a whole bunch of offerings. To specifically name a few: remote monitoring, remote management, your IT infrastructure, right from servers, server racks, Wi-Fi access points, IT hardware, for example, like computers, laptops, printers, all of this is taken care by our end. We also have a dedicated NOC center based in Bangalore, our headquarter, where a dedicated team will sit and monitor all the client's requirements parameters 24 bar 7. So that is Fluid Pro. What is Fluid Print? As the name suggests, this is our print manufacturing solution. What we do here is we offer printers on a rental basis. We also offer printers that can be purchased, but what exactly this is assume that you have about 500 printers requirement, but this is spread out in different locations. We'll be able to simply cater to that. We'll take up the entire requirement and we will provide the printers on a rental basis. You will only be charged on a pay per print basis. What that means is based on a number of papers you print, whether it's a weekly, monthly, or quarterly or annual basis, you will be charged for that. The entire printers that you're taking is not charged for, the service is charged for. So that is what Fluid Print is. We are also number one in India on this end. Now, moving to Fluid Map. What is Fluid Map? Now, I spoke about managed IT. I spoke about managed print, right? Which means you have a sprawl of IT assets. You also have printers, you have computers, everything spread across. The major question is how do we manage this? How do you monitor this? This is what Fluid Map is. So, Fluid Map is a remote solution that we deploy in your network, and this will take care of all the IT assets that are deployed in your organization. Your uptime, downtime, all of this is taken care of. And your dedicated field service executive will also have access to this. So if your printer is out of toners or cartridge levels are low, or if there's any sort of downtime, the dedicated field engineer will also be able to access this. So what is Fluid Trail? This is our process automation solution. We have document management built into this, and right from simple to complex automation for different teams in an organization, your HR team, finance, procurement teams, different teams are catered to. Now, while these might not fully resonate with the audience here, something that I think all of you can relate to here is our Flow Tax, which is our managed GST solution. So this is an all-in-one, one-stop solution for anything, everything GST. So your filing, your reconciliation automation, e-invoicing, any sort of ERP integration right from SAP, Oracle, Microsoft Dynamics, all of this is taken care of. We also have a dedicated team that sits in-house, which can take care of your filing and reconciliation. Essentially, you can outsource your requirement to us. So that is Flotax. And we also have presence on the retail end, which I will not be talking about today. So that's it on the company introduction. Once again, thank you all for your patience. Audience, I'm going to quickly launch a poll for all of you. Now, since this is purely dedicated presentation and Q&A only session, we will not be having any sort of demo as such in the demo. But what I'd like to quickly launch is a poll for all of you to understand if any of you are interested in a free demo of Flotax, our GST solution. Please note that we will give an absolute free of cost demo based on your requirement. We will understand and show you a demo of our solution. We have different modules as I was explaining. Some of you might have requirement for e-invoicing only, or some of you are looking for filing, or if there's anyone on the higher end who's looking for automation in terms of integration or something like that, we will also be able to take care of that. So those of you, okay, I can already see a bunch of them who are saying yes and no here. I will leave this poll on for the next 30 to 40 seconds and take this down. So those of you who are showing interest, our team will reach out to you in about 2-3 working days and we will arrange a demo based on your requirement. Okay, let me end the poll. Thank you all for your inputs. Moving forward, without any further ado, let me introduce the speaker for the day, Mr. Akela Prakasa Rao. Once again, audience, I hope all of you are able to see the screen and also able to hear us. Yeah. All right. So let me quickly introduce our speaker for the day, Mr. Akela Prakasa Rao. Mr. Akela has over 27 years of experience in the field of indirect taxes with exposure in government, consultancy, and industries like auto and pharma. Mr. Akela is an independent indirect tax advocate. He graduated in 1989 from BITS Pilani in electrical and electronics engineering. He is also a gold medal holder who completed LLB from Andhra University in the year 2001. Mr. Akela is also a certified fraud examiner, but currently not active in the field. His previous stints, his professional stints, were with CBIC from 1994 to 2008. He's worked for KPMG Bangalore from 2008 to 13. His other major stints were with Toyota Kirloskar Motor from February 2013 to November 2016 and Biocon from November 2016 to June 2021. He is also a member of various indirect tax committees of various trade bodies, to name a few like BCCI, CII, FICCI, and so on. While aside doing webinars with us regularly, he's also an active article writer in TIOL, Tax Sutra on various tax issues. He's also an active speaker and panelist on various other forums addressing indirect tax matters. As I mentioned, he comes with immense expertise for industries like our auto and pharma, having worked in that field. He has exposure and hands-on experience in GST, customs, FTP, central and state excise, and to name a few like that. He's currently practicing as an indirect tax advocate, assisting clients on all aspects of indirect taxes at all levels. So those of you who are interested in any sort of consultancy requirement, any sort of GST issues to be addressed, I will drop Mr. Akela's mail ID and contact if need be on your post-webinar mailer. Feel free to reach out to him. I take great pleasure in introducing him on yet another webinar with us. I'm sure the audience is looking forward to directly hearing from you, sir. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Siddharth, for those kind words, and thanks for all those participants who have taken time out to attend this session today. Of course, that 53rd GST Council discussions would have been much more engaging. But before the 53rd GST Council was announced, that we have planned for rolling out this webinar. And when we have sought the opinions from the participants, most of them, at least 1 in 2, have voted for ISD. Hence, we thought that we will take it. Unfortunately, we thought that in the 53rd GST Council meeting, as it was promised during the mini budget presented by the finance minister in this year before the elections, that there will be clarification going to be issued by the government, that we expected that such a clarification would come, and it is going to be handy for us during the today's discussions. But unfortunately, because of the paucity of time, though it was there in the agenda of the 53rd Council meeting, that it has not been discussed. But we do not know in the ensuing days that some clarifications may come. But as on today, what is the position and how we have to go about it is what is going to be the topic that we are going to discuss today. But before going into the topic, that I am having a couple of things that to share with you. Any of you are having any questions which are already there in the chat box, definitely that I am going to touch base on them at the end of the session. But all your questions henceforth, please shift it to the Q&A box, because there is a separate Q&A chat box is there for you. So you can put your queries there. So we will answer all of them. And second thing is, somebody had raised a concern that this kind of a marketing promotions should be there at the end of the session or so. But what we need to keep it in mind is nothing comes free in this world. And when a corporate like Websol is taking efforts to present this kind of a webinars which are free of cost to all the participants, you need to bear with some kind of an advertisement, the way you are use it to the YouTubes and Facebooks and others. So that amount of patience one needs to have in order to get some freebies. So coming on to the webinar agenda today, that I am going to touch upon the GST provisions relating to the ISD, conditions that are to be fulfilled, manner of distribution of ITC by the ISD, and then ISD tax invoices, and ISD return, how we have to file it, and what are the valuation provisions for this ISD, what are the settled case laws which are important for us, and some of the important points that we need to keep it in mind, and what is the difference between the ISD and cross charge, what is the debate that is going on, what are the open issues that we have, and what the question and answers. Then floor is going to be open for you. So this is going to be the agenda for today's discussions. Yeah. And this PPT is going to be shared with you, because today that I could not compress it, make it any concise. Hence, it is going to be a lengthy one. Maybe that you have to bear with me, that sometimes that I'll be just reading out without explaining, because that they are all self-explanatory or directly verbatim reproduction of the law. Only when it is important, that maybe that I will be reading it out during my presentation, because most of the time I want to save it for addressing your live queries. So kindly bear with me, keep it in mind that this PPT is going to be shared with all of you. Hence, at your leisure, you can go through, and any queries are there at the end of it, that you have got my mail ID, you can reach out to me at any point of a time. So section 62 of 61 of CGST Act talks about input service distributor, because the topic is about that, we need to understand. It is the office of the supplier of the goods or services, and it receives the tax invoices towards the receipt of the input services, and the said office distributes the credit to a supplier of goods or services having the same PAN, and the said office issues tax invoices or other prescribed documents for distribution of credit. Very lot of your queries are going to be answered if somebody really focuses on the definition itself, that it is the office of the supplier of goods or services. So it can be for both goods, persons who are dealing with goods or service. And this office receives tax invoices towards receipt of input services. Mind you that the ISD has got inputs only, input as input services only. So input goods, you will not be doing the distribution under the ISD. So on the input side, what you will see for ISD is only services. And this said office distributes the credits to the supplier of the goods or services having the same PAN. So this is also very important wording, that having the same PAN. So the PAN cannot be different. So it has to be the same PAN. So the said office issues tax invoice or other prescribed document for distribution of such a credit. So this is what, in nutshell, the definition is. Then a supplier of goods or services may have various offices such as head office, register office, regional office, marketing office, branch, godown, sales depot, which avail the input services such as security, communication, courier, housekeeping, and then they pay the GST. Such units and premises may obtain registration as an ISD distributor for availment of credit and such input services and distribution of credit to other units to resolve the challenge of efficient utilization of the accumulated credit. Okay. Next slide, please. So what are the conditions that one needs to fulfill? That one needs to have a registration. So when a ISD can distribute the services, so one needs to have a registration in place first. So a input service distributor has to compulsorily register as an ISD. Apart from its registration under the GST as a normal taxpayer, such a taxpayer has to specify under the serial number 14 of the RE01 form as an ISD, and they shall be able to distribute the credit to the recipients only after this declaration. So somebody had asked whether we need to have a registration, and the answer is yes, you need to have a registration as an ISD. So how this invoicing? So the distribution of this credit can happen through issuance of an ISD invoice. So what is ISD invoice? We will touch upon that during the course of the presentation. So are there any returns? Yes. The amount of tax credit distributed should not exceed the amount of tax credit available with the ISD as at the end of relevant month to be filed in GSTR 6 by 13th of the succeeding month by the ISD, and can get the information of the ISD from the GSTR to be returned. So the recipient of the tax credit can view the tax credit so distributed by the ISD in 6A and auto-populated from the supplier's return. In turn, the recipient branch can claim the same by declaring it in 3B, and ISD need not file any annual returns. So that's all about, in short, about the returns. So there is a return mechanism is also there. GSTR 6 is the form for it. Next slide, please. Yeah. What is the manner of distribution? So as per section 21 of the CGST Act states that the input tax service distributor shall distribute the credit of central tax as central tax or integrated tax, and integrated tax as integrated tax by way of issue of a document containing the amount of input tax credit being distributed in such a manner as may be prescribed, and the distribution of the credit of state tax and UT tax. So it should be distributed either as a state tax or the integrated tax, or the UT tax or the integrated tax. And it is to be noted that the credit of CGST and SGST can be distributed as IGST also if the ISD and the recipient are in different states. So these are some basic rules. Next slide, please. So what are the conditions that one needs to keep it in mind? The tax credit available against any specific input service used entirely by one of the recipients can be allocated only to that recipient for utilization of such credit and not to other recipients. And the tax credit available against the input services used commonly by more than one recipient of the ISD shall be allocated to those recipients on a proportionate basis in the ratio of turnover of all such recipients that are operational during the year. So it is 1 year that you need to keep it in mind for distributing it as per the turnovers. The tax credit available against the input services used commonly by all the recipients of the ISD shall be allocated to all the recipients on a proportionate basis in the ratio of the turnover of all the recipients that are operational during the year. Next slide, please. So as per section 22, specify the conditions which for distribution. that the credit can be distributed to the recipient of the credit against a document containing such details as may be prescribed, which is a tax invoice, ISD invoice. The amount of credit distributed shall not exceed the amount of credit available. So what is not yours should not be distributed. The credit of tax paid on input services attributable to a recipient of credit shall be distributed only to that recipient. Okay, and the credit of tax paid on input services attributed to more than one recipient of credit shall be distributed among such recipient to whom the input services is attributable, and such distribution shall be pro rata on the basis of turnover in a state or a turnover in a union territory of such recipient during the relevant period to the aggregate turnover of all such recipients to whom such input services is attributable and which are operational in that current year during the said relevant period. See, the sentences may be too long and I may be rushing through the whole thing, but you need not worry that you are going to receive the PPT and leisurely you can go through because everything is available in the public domain. There's nothing secret about it. But what is secret? What is the understanding? How you have to interpret it? All those things I am going to explain in detail and I will attend to your questions also. Nothing to worry. Next slide, please. Yeah, the credit of tax paid on input services attributable to all recipients of credit shall be distributed among such recipients, and it should be, I think it is a repetition of the previous one, sorry. And so there are a couple of important definitions that you need to keep it in mind. A relevant period. So if the recipient of the credit have turnover in their state or a union territory in the financial year preceding the year during which credit is to be distributed, they said financial year, or if some or all participants of the credit do not have any turnover in their state or union territory in the financial year preceding the year during which the credit is to be distributed, the last quarter for which details of such turnover of all the recipients are available, previous to the month during which credit is to be distributed. So somewhere that you have to define the period. So that's how that they have defined it, that if you are continuously in operations, then it is going to be the previous year. But if you are not, then it is going to be the previous quarter. Nothing great about it. If you are starting the operations, then you can do it as per your own calculation. Nobody is going to question that. Next slide, please.
Sir, I just want to quickly launch a poll.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is, audience, we're going to do a quick recap. There are some slides that we've already covered, but this is going to be some certain things that will be that has been covered already. So let's do a quick recap. What is the primary purpose of an input service distributor in GST? I'll leave this poll on for the next 1 minute. I think most of you are obviously okay. It's become one-sided now, the answers. Okay, audience, can we have maximum number of engagement on this? About 28 have, okay, no, 30 have attended. Can we have about 45? So that's about 13 more. Let's see if we can get that. Audience, we also have a few more polls incoming. And those of you who have already put down the queries in Q&A, we are noting them down. It will stay right there. We will take it up towards the end of the session.
All
Okay.
those who have typed their queries in the chat box, that if they have time, that they can type them in the Q&A, or otherwise we will attend to that also.
Absolutely.
Nothing to worry.
Yes, yes. I see Mr. Shailesh's question. We will take that up, Mr. Shailesh. Okay, I think I'll end the poll. 37 responses is not bad, but I am looking forward to more responses in the next few polls. I'm just sharing the results. Sir, any comments on this to distribute?
There's no comment, it is unilateral.
Right, yeah. The two of them have selected something else, but
that's okay. That
yeah.
Because of this small wrong understanding on their part.
Possible.
But certainly the thing is that the primary objective for distribution of the ISD to the branches is the motive for the ISD. Yeah.
Moving to
Right.
the next slide, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, what is the meaning of the turnover? So turnover in a state or a union territory means the aggregate value of all taxable supplies, excluding the value of inward supplies on which tax is payable by a person on reverse charge, and exempted supplies made within the state, export of goods and services are both, and interstate supplies of goods or services are both, and excludes the taxes paid. So it is the same turnover definition in the GST. It is same thing which is adopted here also. There's nothing new in it. And what is the recipient of a credit mean? The supplier of the goods or services are both having the same PAN. Important thing is same PAN as that of the ISD. Meaning of the turnover is in relation to any registered person engaged in the taxable supplies under this act, means the value of the turnover reduced by the amount of any tax. So these are all definitions which are available in the public domain. Hence, I am not spending too much of a time. But the thrust in this particular slide is same PAN. I'll tell you what is the importance of understanding this PAN in the coming slides. Next slide, please. Yeah. What is the procedure? So this is a lengthy procedure given. I don't want to elaborate that. You can refer to Rule 39. For your benefit that I have produced it here, reproduced it. But when you get the PPT, please go through it, because it's a some formula and all are explained in this, on which I don't want to spend this valuable time. Next slide, please. So the input tax distributor shall issue an ISD invoice. So that is prescribed under Rule 54. And ISD shall issue a ISD credit note for reduction of the credit in case input credit is already distributed and gets reduced for any reason. Somebody had asked me this question in the Q&A, saying that if I wrongly have given the credit, then you have got this mechanism of credit note. So by which that it can be nullified. So, and any additional amount of input tax credit on account of issuance of a debit note to an ISD by the supplier shall be distributed in the manner and subject to the conditions as detailed above, and it in the same manner, and it has to be reported in the GSTR 6 return only. Any input tax credit required to be reduced on account of a issuance of a credit note to the ISD by the supplier shall be apportioned to each recipient in the same ratio in which the ITC contained in the original invoice was distributed. So the same procedure needs to be followed. Like a credit note, debit note, it is akin to the same. So there's nothing new about it. Next slide, please. Yeah, again, about the conditions, the credit of tax paid under reverse charge is not available for distribution. So somebody is asking that I'm having a RCM, so how I have to go about it? See, when you have an RCM, that RCM always has to be received by a regular registration. A RCM invoice cannot be taken by an ISD, even though that RCM services, like I'm a lawyer, I am giving some legal services to a firm which is having multi-locational units, that it is having lot many manufacturing sites across India. But I have given my advice to the head office, but this advice is about some 2-3 of their manufacturing sites, a problem relating to some 2-3 of their manufacturing sites for which that I have given the advice. So what they have to do, that they have to accept my invoice not in their ISD registration, but in the normal registration. So you may have a doubt that my HO is not into any kind of supplies, either of goods or of services, but I have taken a ISD registration only for the purpose of distributing the credit. But suddenly that there is a RCM invoice from an advocate which is addressed to my head office. So what I need to do? So the best course for you would be the head office has to take a normal registration only for the purpose of receiving such RCM invoices. So initially what they have to do, that they have to receive this RCM invoice, pay the reverse charge mechanism tax, and that tax that they have to transfer it to the ISD by way of a cross charge invoice. Now I am using the word cross charge, which is going to be the debate in the coming slides for you, that I will explain you what is the difference between an ISD and the cross charge, what is to be done when you have to choose ISD or a cross charge. All those things we will discuss. But for RCM, please have a clarity that for an RCM invoice, you need to have a normal registration. Take that RCM invoice into that normal registration and pay your reverse charge mechanism taxes, whatever are there, and you take the credit. And after taking the credit, same amount, you cross charge it to the ISD. Once it is cross charged to the ISD, then those 2-3 units The example that I have cited you just now. So to those 2-3 units that you distribute the ISD credit. That's how it has to be done. So it is a two-step process for you in case of an RCM, and 2 registrations will be involved in it. So that we need to keep it in mind. So that's how that RCM has to be handled. Then the tax credit available against any specific input service entirely by one should be given to that party, and commonly by more than one should be given to all those on a pro rata basis. And against the input services used commonly by all of them, that you have to give them in the pro rata basis. And all these things, it's just a repetition of it in order to give more trust on the importance of this distribution mechanism for you. Otherwise, that we can move to the next slide. One other thing from the previous slide that you need to keep it in mind is always only for the operational units ISD can be distributed. Those units which are not operational, they will not get the ISD credit. That you have to keep it in mind. Next slide, please. So the distribution will be done as per the turnovers and all that. And ISD, CGST will be CGST, IGST, or SGST will also be SGST or IGST. UTGST will be UTGST or IGST, and IGST will be as IGST. That's how the credit distribution, which I have already told to you earlier also. So they can distribute across the states. A CGST, SGST put together will be distributed as IGST. So that is also was explained to you. And any excess credit that it can be recovered, and any short credit can be compensated by issuing another debit note. So the credit note, debit note, whatever the mechanism is there for the normal tax invoices, the same things will apply even in the case of ISD also. Next slide, please. Yeah. So what is ISD tax invoice? So under Rule 54(1) of CGST rules, the input service distributor invoice has been explained. So it will contain this name and address, consecutive serial number, and the date of issue, name and address of the GST and recipient to whom the credit is getting distributed, what is the amount of the credit, and then the digital signature. All this will be there. Where the ISD is an office of the banking company or a financial institution, including a non-banking company, tax invoice shall include any document in lieu thereof by whatever name called, whether or not serially numbered, but containing the information as prescribed. Because that there is a relaxation in case of NBFC and finance and banking companies for issuance of a ISD invoices. So the same will apply here also. So that is what. Next slide, please. Yeah, what are the returns? So section 34(4) talks about the ISD return. So for every calendar month that you need to file this return within 13 days after the end of such month. And Rule 65 talks about that every ISD on the basis of details contained in the form 6A, after adding, correcting, deleting, furnish electronically the GSTR 6. And Rule 65 says that details of invoices furnished by the ISD will be made available in Part B of GSTR 2A, so that it can be taken in the 3B, a mechanism which in nutshell was explained to you already. So this is how, what is the invoice, we told you, what is the return, we told you, how it has to be distributed, we told you, what are the conditions, we told you. So we'll see what next is there for us. So next slide, please. So this is one other important thing one needs to understand, that there is a valuation provision in the GST law. So section 28 talks about this valuation provisions. So it is made pari materia with the customs valuation rules at the time of introduction of the GST. So here you have to follow these rules sequentially. So if a open market value is available, that has to be adopted always for a transaction. And then if it is not available, then you have to go for a like kind or quality. Then based on the cost of production, and Rule 31, reasonable means consistent with section 15 and provision of the CGST rules. And if the recipient is able to avail the input tax credit, then value declared in the invoice is considered as an open market value. So even in the recent 53rd GST Council meeting also, this particular provision, the last bullet, which I'm showing here, if the recipient is in a position to avail 100% of the input tax credit, whatever value you declare will be treated as a open market value and no questions will be asked by the government. And 53rd GST Council has taken this to a step further. How the rule is going to be amended, that we have to wait and see. But what they say, if a zero value has been declared, then in some conditions, not in every scenario, but in some conditions, when zero value is declared, then that zero value is construed as an open market value. No questions asked. So this is a very, very important condition. One needs to keep it in mind while discussing about the ISD, cross share, all these things, because it's going to come in handy for you in the audits and investigations. So next slide, please. Yeah. So some of the important case laws that I'm going to just brief you about. The Columbia Asia, which is a very famous case, originated in Bangalore. So there is a hospital chain which is there across India. So the question that has come before them in the form of a advance ruling initially is that, is there any GST invoice to be given to branch offices when the head office is catering to the branch office salary maintenance, accounts, and other things? So when such a query was raised before the advanced ruling authorities, the advanced ruling authorities have stretched themselves and given an order saying that, yes, there is a service between these two because the branch office is registered separately in that particular state and head office is located in another state. So it is a transaction between two registrations, hence GST is chargeable. This has created such a kind of a controversy that all consultants have made very good money. Why? Because that what is the value on which this kind of invoice has to be raised and how the calculation is to be justified. So if a CEO sitting in a head office is also giving directions to a branch office in another state, then how much of the CEO's salary is to be cross-charged to that particular branch office for the service rendered by him? These are the kind of hair-splitting questions which have come up in the minds of the people, and the consultants have added fuel to the fire, and it has become such a kind of a rage that this AIR has gone up to the AAAR, and after that it has traveled to the High Court. Now this matter is currently pending in the Supreme Court. That's how the Columbia Asia has triggered a litigation. Then comes the Cummins India case in the state of Maharashtra. It is also emanated out of an advance ruling, wherein the activity is of a HO in availing the ITC common input services on behalf of the branches, whether it qualifies as a supply and would attract the GST. Then, in such a scenario, the AAAR held that HO is not entitled to avail the ITC on such common input services. They have to invariably take a registration as an ISD and cross-charge and distribute, not the cross-charge, they distribute the credit to the respective branch offices. That's how the decision has come in. Next slide, please. Yeah, then the BG Shirke Construction Technologies Limited case has come up in Maharashtra only, wherein the managerial and leadership services provided by the register office to its group companies and sites, whether it should be considered as a supply of service or not, and whether it is liable to GST or not, is the debate. So the applicant can continue to charge certain lump sum amount as has been done in the past in terms of the second proviso to 28.2. Here comes that 28.2 provision, wherein I have earlier explained to you that if the recipient is in a position to avail 100% of the input tax credit, then whatever value that has been declared on the face of invoice will be considered as an open market value, came to handy for this particular case. So they said that most of the recipients of such services are eligible for full credit who would comply with the provisions of Section 17 at their respective ends. So that's how the decision in BG Shirke case was given. So these are the important decisions one needs to keep it in mind for having a fruitful discussion about what is to be adopted, whether it is a ISD or a cross charge, which we will be touching upon in the later slides. Next slide, please. Yeah. So some of the important points that one needs to learn from these decisions is when there are several registrations under the same PAN, one needs to have a ISD registration separately, which will facilitate the common services received to be apportioned across all such registrations. So again, I am giving importance to the same PAN that one needs to keep it in mind. When you have got multi registrations under the same PAN, then it is always suggestible that you go for a ISD also in order to distribute the common credits. So it is important to have a separate registration at the head office in order to meet the reverse charge obligation. This point I have explained very clearly at the time of discussing on the slide about reverse charge mechanism, that you need to have a normal registration for receiving the RCM invoices and subsequently paying the RCM and transferring that RCM credit to the ISD so that it can be distributed under the ISD regime. And then cross-charge mechanism is an option to be used only when head office is commonly incurring the expenses, the benefits of which are attributed to the branches also, like rental services of head office, employees expenditure, statutory audit fee, litigation, etc., where the invoices directly come to the head office. In such a case, they can use the cross-charge mechanism. For cross-charging to the other entities, the second proviso can be resorted to, as clarified by Maharashtra rulings, a nominal value can be given. When under the same group, several companies with distinct PAN numbers exist, the option to be followed is cross-charge, and ISD is always to be under single PAN. It cannot be between different PAN numbers. So this point why I am telling you that by taking an example with Liberty, that a company like Wipro, which is having 70 different PAN numbers, when they want to distribute the credits, they cannot take one single ISD because ISD is always related to a single PAN. So when you want to transact between two different PAN numbers, then the only option that you have is cross charge. So when there is no intention to apportion the expenses incurred on behalf of the branches by the head office is not entitled for such ITC, as the expenses towards the branch are not in the course of business for the head office. That one needs to keep it in mind. Next slide, please. Yeah. So what is the comparative summary between the ISD and cross charge? For ISD, you need a registration. For cross charge, you don't require a registration. For ISD, distribution of only the input services, but cross charge can be for goods, services, and even the capital goods, everything. And in the ISD, distribution should be as prescribed under section 20 read with rule 39. But cross charge, it can be by valuation mechanism, section 15 read with rules 28, 30, 31. And for ISD, there is a separate return compliance is there. But cross charge, you don't have any separate return and the compliances. Next slide, please.
Sir, let me
please
launch a poll. I'll also give you a quick break.
Yeah.
So audience, I want all of you to take a look at your chat. We're going to quickly drop a link on the chat. Now, this is a live LinkedIn poll that's running on our social media handle. I request all of you to quickly click on this link and check out the question, answer it, and come back. So the link is on the chat, as you can see. I will read out the question. What form is used by ISDs to file their monthly return? There are about 4 options, as you can see: GSTR 7, GSTR 3B, GSTR 1, and GSTR 6. I request all of you to enter the answer of your choice, and you can come back to the webinar screen. Okay, Mr. Biswajit says GSTR 6. Okay, looks like we already have about 20 votes there. Not bad at all. And also on the on a side note, those of you who are interested to see some information regarding GST or any informative carousels based on anything related to GST, tax, e-invoicing, regular updates, please feel free to follow us. You will not be disappointed. You will see a lot of content. We also have engaging polls related to the same. Okay, those of you are done with the answer, we can go back to the webinar screen. Sir, over to you. I'll go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Sir, I think you're on mute. Okay.
Yeah, no. On some of the open issues that I just wanted to share it with you, because these are the issues on which the clarity is required. So what will be the valuation mechanism for cross charge where the recipient is not eligible for the full ITC? Do we need to go by the section 28(1), wherein that open market value, if not available, then goods of same kind and quality, etc. It is going to be a very cumbersome procedure. So that is one which the authorities have to clarify. So whether non-GST or exempt supplies to be included in the cost of provision of services for cross charge, there is no clarity on it. So even ICAI has to think and bring out a paper about it. How to interpret eligibility of full input tax credit qua the supply or qua the recipient. So whether if the recipient is entitled for the full credit, so is it against each supply or that it is for the recipient? That has not been clarified. So whether the taxpayer will have an option to adopt a different valuation mechanism wherein one recipient is eligible for full credit and other is not eligible for the full credit. And what will be the consequences for a taxpayer who did not choose any of the options, did not distribute the credit through ISD or cross charge and retained the full credit? What is to be done with him? And whether flexibility to choose between ISD and cross charge for the common input services will apply when the same service is cross charged in one period and ISD mechanism is applied in another period. How to regularize the practice? And what are the fate of the pending notices and orders which were already issued on adoption of the cross charge versus vis-a-vis ISD? So how to interpret the term internally generated services in the context of exclusion of salary costs? Because if you refer to the famous circular 199, which was issued by the CBIC while clarifying on the ISD mechanism, that they have very clearly told that as a result of this litigation on the Columbia Asia decision, that they told that the salary costs are exempt because it is not going to be forming part of the service consideration. So how we have to go about the valuation is the question. So these are some open points on which a further clarity from the government is needed. Next slide, please. Yeah, some of the frequently asked questions that I have put it here. So you can go through these slides leisurely, but for your benefit, maybe that I am rushing through the thing that recipient eligible for full credit, then any value that is there will be acceptable. And when recipient is not entitled for the full credit, then in such a case that the valuation mechanism has to be followed. And the salary cost, of course, circular 199 has given the exemption to you. So next slide, please. And if in the 50th GST Council meeting, it was recommended that amendment may be made in the GST law to make ISD mechanism mandatory prospectively. But so far that we have not come across any such legislation with clarity. But what are the probable challenges that can be there if such a levy is going to be there? That identification of the common input services received from the third party, proper communication with vendors to ensure that invoices are raised on the ISD going forward for forward charge supplies, and normal GSTN for the reverse charge supplies. So I told you that the RCM invoices cannot be accepted by the ISD. So one needs to be careful about it, and proper mechanism to ensure that ISC credit is being distributed in the same month. Accumulation of the ITC in the SEZ unit due to credit distribution. So this accumulation of ITC in the SEZ units due to the ISD mechanism has become a big debate, and the matter was taken up by Britannia Industries in Gujarat state, wherein that Gujarat High Court has given a favorable ruling that it has to be granted to them as a refund. But subsequently, this decision has been followed by many other in many other matters, But however, the primary decision given in the case of Britannia has been challenged by the revenue in the Supreme Court, where the matter is currently pending. Next slide, please. So, would the ITC be available to a GST registrant, though the service procured from the third-party vendor are also directly used by various distinct persons? In such cases, is distribution of ITC required to be done mandatorily through ISD mechanism? So, the answer is yes. And then will ISD be required to be separately registered other than the existing taxpayers? I told you that it is a direct yes. Can credit be distributed only to the revenue generating units? It's not about the revenue generating units, whichever are operational, that it has to be allocated. And can a taxpayer have multiple ISDs? Theoretically, yes, but you need to justify the purpose, because every registration comes with its own compliances also. Can a company have multiple ISDs? Yes, that they can have. And what are the consequences of credit distributed in contravention of the provisions? Then there are mechanisms by which it can be recovered with applicable interest. Do ISD need to file a separate statement? Yes, that compliances that we have discussed. Next slide, please. Can ISD distribute the credit on supplies on which tax is to be discharged under the RCM? This has been elaborately explained to you. The same thing that again that I am putting it as a slide for you, just to have a recap at, in your leisure, that RCM invoices are to be received by normal registration. You pay the RCM, take the credit, transfer it to the ISD so that it can be distributed. That is the mechanism. Next slide, please. Should ITC be distributed by ISD to a unit registered as an SEZ? Yes. If SEZ is also an operational unit, you have to. But yes, there is a Britannia Industries writ is pending currently in the Supreme Court, which I have explained to you. So we have to wait for its decision outcome to come. Next slide, please. So, in case of a debit note raised by the supplier on ISD, is it necessary to distribute the ITC on the debit note to other branches in the same proportion in which the credit pertaining to the original invoice was distributed? It is not necessary that ITC in the debit note will be attributable to the same portion in the other stages as it was in the original invoice. But however, in case the credit note issued by the ISD by the supplier, the ITC reduced using such credit note shall be apportioned by the ISD in the same proportion as the original credit was distributed earlier. It is noteworthy that the company can have multiple registrations for its offices as ISD. So more than one registration of ISD is also possible. So in the interim budget 2024, as I told you in the initial stages itself, that FM had made a statement to say that the manner of distribution of credit by input service distributor, a solution will be proposed under section 20, which addresses the distribution mechanism. But the revised wording of the section mandates that any office of the supplier of goods or services are both receiving tax invoices towards the receipt of input services to be registered as an ISD. That mandate for registration was only clarified, but they did not clarify further on the open issues that we told. Unfortunately, due to paucity of time, as I told you earlier, that in the 53rd GST Council meeting held on 22nd June 2024, they could not take up this issue for further clarity. So that is what is the situation so far on the ISD. So now, just to recap, because to summarize, that ISD, you can have a registration only for multiple units under the same PAN. But when you are dealing with distribution of credit between two different PANs or registrations with two different PANs, then cross-charge is the only solution for you. So as a thumb rule, you can say that ISD operates under the same PAN, cross-charge operates under the different PANs. But queries may come that there are some common services like HO providing services to the branch offices, things like that. If such kind of services are internally generated invoices, like see, HO is having one single instance of a SAP. That SAP will give invoice to the HO, but the branch offices are also using the same SAP at their locations. So it has to be cross-charged. So such the things that one needs to see that where we have to cross-charge and where we have to do an ISD. So if the common services are there, then if the invoice is directly coming to the ISD registration, because that for receiving an invoice in the ISD registration also, you need to be very careful while placing your purchase order itself, that you have to mention the ISD registration number so that the invoice comes to the ISD registration. Otherwise, that it will be a problem for you always, that the invoice, a invoice meant for an ISD is received by the normal registration. Then from the normal registration, again, you have to transfer it to the ISD in order to further distribute it. So such kind of unnecessary complications will come, which will add to your work. Hence, please keep it in mind that whenever you feel that this particular input service is going to be utilized between 2 or 3 of my units, more than 2 of your own units under the same pan, better to place the purchase order for such a service from the ISD registration, so that directly that the services can be distributed. But in the case of RCM, you are not left with any other option. And then between 2 different PAN numbers, when you want to interact, then cross charge is the only mechanism for you. So I think that I have come to end of my presentation. Siddharth?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
I know.
So we can take up the queries. But
so what I'm going to do, that I will go to the chat box once,
okay,
because that I will quickly close, because that in the Q&A we can see that the queries are there, that one after the other I will, and whatever the queries that were sent to you, that if the query is available in the audience even now also, then I will be happy to address them directly.
For sure.
Okay. So whatever you wanted to understand between ISD and cross charge, I think elaborately that I have explained. So the objective of attending this session, I think you must have got little clarity. Yeah, one freight invoices, how to handle previously,
yes.
We have handled through cross charge, but we have to route them through ISD. See, this is what I told you, that in one of the FAQs or somewhere in the slides that I have addressed this also, that for some part of period that I have done it in one mechanism, in another part period that I am doing it in another. See, when there is a confusion, whatever method that you have chosen has to be ratified at some point of a time. If you are already having any kind of a litigation around it, then certainly you can plead this as a ground. But the going forward, when you have to do it, then I've already told what are the thumb rule. See, if the freight invoices are to be distributed between 2 units, and both the units are falling in the same pan, then you go by the ISD. But mind you, that while placing the order for such a service, that the purchase order should be placed from the ISD registration, so that it will be easy for you to do that. But unfortunately, if you have received the invoice in the normal registration, the only option left for you will be to cross charge. There is no other option. I think I made it clear, Nagesh. And then how to deal with those cases where ISD related to one state has been mistakenly reported. See, credit note, debit note mechanism that I have told you, that the way that you adjust this kind of things in the normal invoice scenario, the same thing you have to follow it here, Mr. Shubham. Is it necessary to have ISD registration if the HO office has got only one single unit? See, if HO and that single unit you are talking about are two different, then if they are located in the same state, I don't think that you need to have it. But if they are located in 2 different states, that you have to think. But HO is the unit where that you are having the manufacturing unit or the service unit also, then I don't think that you need to have ISD registration also in place. ISD comes into play when you have multiple units, multiple registrations under the same pan. But if you have got one single registration, there is no need for you to have any ISD. Then normally bank is handled by HO. In such a case, it is the same. Whatever that I have told you, that if it has to be distributed, then you better take that bank invoice in the ISD so that you can distribute it. And
yeah, sir, I think you should probably take up the question from Mr. Shailesh.
What I am doing is that I am just closing down this chat box so that I can take their queries also.
Yeah,
no, I have got time.
This is also on chat, sir.
You got 4 plants in different states. most of the service bills in the name of HO, how will you distribute? See, when you have got 4 plants in 4 different states, but all of them under the same PAN, the answer to you after this session should be that it is ISD. Is required to take ISD registration separately at the HO and distribute the credit? The answer is yes. If the branch receives the invoice for other plants, how to distribute? See, ideally, that should not be the case. How a branch can receive when a HO exists. But in case accidentally, if the branch received it, and if the branch has to pass it on to the other branch, then branch cannot do it on its own. Hence, branch has to first cross-charge it to the ISD, and from ISD, it has to be distributed again. So, it is a cumbersome process. So, better in all such cases, my advice would be to nullify that invoice by way of accepting a credit note and later taking that invoice directly into the ISD registration and then distributing it would be the ideal way. So I think Shailesh, that I have answered your question. If any further things are there, that I will answer to you again. We have to do, if any of the ISD vendor failed to file the GST or 3B department issued notice, please inform the procedure to be followed. Sir, wherever the input provider is not uploading his 3B, it is the same mechanism, sir. For ISD, there is nothing separate treatment. The way you deal with him in the normal case, that here also you have to do it. Either you have to approach him or whatever the mechanisms that you have in order to get your ITC, that you have to protect your right. If it relates to 18, 19, 19, 20, can we still rectify it by way of a credit note and debit notes? I did not get it. So what about single branch with same PAN ISD cross charge? Sir, if only single unit exists, there is no question of ITC. When 2 registrations are there, then only the question of ISD comes into the picture. Then IRN, whether it is required for this ISD tax invoice. ISD tax invoices need not go through the IRN process. Siddharth, I don't think that you will be processing it through e-invoicing, no? ISD invoices.
I doubt, sir, but I don't want to confirm on that. I think I can check and
Yeah, please.
come back on this. Yeah.
If you anything relating to 18, 19, 19, 20, can we still rectify it by way of a credit note or a debit note? See, 18, 19, 19, 20, already the time period for issuance of a credit note, debit note are over. So, I doubt that any rectification can be done now. What GSTR 6 can I pay? The GST through ISD of default vendors, no such problem. ISD will not be making any payments and all that, sir. I'm having 14 GSTNs. I have applied for ISD registration, but I have not received the certificate going forward how to distribute the ITC for 3 months of 24-25. See, if you have set up the unit very recently, find out why that you are not getting a ISD registration, sir. But otherwise, that there is no other mechanism for you. So till you get the ISD registration, either you have to wait. But if there is any kind of an urgency to put to use the credit, then my only suggestion for you is to resort to cross charge for the time being. If it is a new unit. So I think in the chat box, more or less, that I have taken up all the queries. Now I am coming to the Q&A box. If any further questions are there, my humble request is that please type your questions in the Q&A box. Those who want to explain the query, they can raise their hands so that we will attend to them also. So the first query in the Q&A box is it required to have a ISD registration if there is only one manufacturing unit and HO registered office doesn't supply any goods or services? See, sir, that if there is a single registration that and all the service invoices are also coming to the registered place, manufacturing unit only, then I don't think that you need to have. So, but if any invoices are addressed to your HO, which are to be put to you, because HO doesn't have any kind of output liability, there is no point in keeping the ITC at the HO. So, in order to transition or transfer the ITC available at a HO to the unit where it can be put to use, you need to have a ISD registration. How to deal with those cases where ISD credit related to one state has been reported in another state? I think this I have already answered in the chat. What if the ISD invoices are received by the company during the subsequent month, that is after filing the GSTR 6 by see, sir, there is no problem that you are talking about, ma'am. You are talking about the ISD invoices are received by the company during the subsequent month means I'm a little confused, but I'm addressing both the scenarios how it can happen. One, that there is a third party service provider who has issued an invoice to you for ISD in the subsequent month. Though these services are performed in this month, say June, but you have received the invoice in July. Absolutely no problem. In the month of July, you take the credit in the ISD and then subsequently you distribute it. But if your query is relating to that the head office distributing the credit in this month, but the branch has received it in the subsequent month, it cannot happen because head office and branch office, when the distribution happens in the 2B, that wherever you are able to see it, that is the time when you can take the credit. So in both the scenarios, because see, the entire GST is operated in the digital mode. So I don't think that there will be any kind of a time lag. But if it is there also, absolutely no problem. The invoices pertaining to the previous month can come in the next month also. And then certainly you are entitled for the credit. On what to be done when invoices are reflecting in the GSTR 6A after filing the 6. Then the subsequent month you can avail it, ma'am. Absolutely, I don't think that there is any kind of a restriction on it. Can we take ISD registration June month, and can I use only after mandatory? Nagaraj sir, I am unable to understand this question. Can we take ISD registration in June month? You can take it. There is no problem. Can I use only after mandatory? After mandatory what? I am unable to. If you can explain, maybe that I will be able to. I taken ISD ITC June month, and can I distribute it in July month? Or see, sir, one thing is that you need to keep it in mind. Whatever is the invoices that you have received in the ISD registration during the month, so there can be a delay in receipt of the invoice, the way Neha madam just has queried, which I have answered to you. So whatever invoices that you have received, whatever are they available in the 6A, all those credits are to be distributed in the same month, because ISD starts with a 0, ends with a 0 every month. This is one other thumb rule that everybody needs to take note of, that ISD always starts with a 0 and ends with a 0. So whatever credit that you have received has to be distributed at the end of the month. You cannot carry forward any credit to the next month. RCM payable, can we distribute under ISD? I told you what is the mechanism, sir. First, RCM has to be received by the normal tax registration, and then transferred to the ISD and subsequently distribute. Can the distribution be made to the particular states instead of all operating states as per our requirement practically? Yes, definitely. There is absolutely no problem. It is not the case that all units should get. If that particular service is relatable only to particular units only, so you can distribute it only to those units. You need not distribute to all the units. Invoices reflecting 6A but not filed by the supplier, in which return period are we supposed to? As and when the supplier has uploaded it, then only, because the credit has to be coming to the government in order for you to get it. It is the same rule what is applicable for the tax invoice. There's nothing new in it. Instead of distribution of ISD, can I do cross charge directly to the factory? See, that is what I told you, that when you have to resort to the cross charge instead of ISD. Office of Top Management Distributor. HO but telephone under ISD registration, but telephone used for HO only, but it falls under the ISD distribution. No, it cannot fall. If something is exclusively meant for the HO, and HO is not into any business activities and all, if here, and second thing is, ISD is meant only for distribution of input service credit, but not for the input tax credit on the goods, on purchase of goods. What the credit that is that can be distributed by the ISD is in relation to services, not in relation to the goods. Can we raise challan against notices or pay interest? If any DRC 03 can be raised under this registration also. There is no question of any DRC 03 is coming under ISD, sir. ISD doesn't have any cash register, credit registers and all. Every month it starts with a 0, ends with a 0. Corporate office expenses for transfer to branches can be brought under GST mechanism. Already they were brought, Mr. Shailesh. Ineligible tax invoices comes in GST. Can we reject them? Jolly well, sir. Whatever rules that you follow for normal invoices are applicable even in the case of ISD. Corporate office expenses for transfer to branches can be brought under the ISD mechanism. Yes. My company is providing the custodian services, but due to lack of service availability at my location, company is taking such facility from other states, and in other state, they have taken a property on rent and pay a rent expense, and there will be no turnover in that state. Should I take the IST registration to transfer this credit in case of no outward supply in other state? So, Arpit, as I understand that you are into custodial services for which you need places. So, you have, say, for example, that you are having a registration in Karnataka, but you have taken some place in Tamil Nadu on rent, where that you are rendering the custodial services. But how, without having a registration in that state, that you can provide the services in relation to fixed asset? I'm having a little doubt that how you are doing this services. If you can explain to me, if you are still there in the session, then I would be happy to answer your query. How we can identify the common expenses for distributing of credit like expenses we need to consider. See, that is what I told you, sir. Initially, while placing the request, while raising the purchase order itself, that you know where exactly these services are going to be put to use, right? If such is the case, then you should be able to decide that since this service is going to be used by more than 2 registrations belonging to me, that I have to place this request for the receipt of these services from my ISD, and I have to receive this in the ISD registration and then subsequently distribute between these two units. So if you are not having that kind of a visibility, then it is a problem. But wherever you have got that visibility and clarity, better that you take that particular expenditure in the ISD registration and then subsequently distribute it. ISD will not cover under e-invoicing. Yeah. How the corporate office expenses like depreciation, admin expenses, general overheads distributed to the branch. Sir, it is an accounting entry. It has got nothing to do with the GST. GST is in relation to supply of goods and services which are taxable. So, monetary adjustments in the books of accounts do not have any kind of linkage with the GST. So, I think I have again clarified that. And again, I am coming back. There are two queries in the Q&A. HO is charged for ERP management on subscription basis. This is exactly the example that I have told you about SAP, sir. So, you have to follow that. That through ISD that you have to distribute. Whether I can charge to branches. Anonymous attendee. So I do not know whether I can charge to what you want to charge to the branches. But if there is something chargeable, you can do it, sir. ITC belongs to all states, but can I distribute ITC to 5 or 6 states? See, ITC belongs to all the states, but the expenditure that you have incurred is in relation to all the units or not is the point that will decide to whom the credit has to be distributed, madam. See, for example, that you have bought, you have taken some service which is used only in 2 of your 6 manufacturing units. So it is clearly you can establish on paper that this particular service that you have availed is meant only for these 2 plants which are manufacturing, say for example, one particular product. But the all other 4 plants of you are into some other products. So in such a scenario, that particular expenses can be distributed between those 2 plants only. You need not distribute to all 6 plants that you have. So that can be done. The only thing is that you need to have enough justification in your hand that this expenditure pertains to these 2 units only. That is what is the most important thing for you. So I think I have covered all the questions that are there in the chat box as well as in the Q&A box. Now still we are having 2/3 of the people present now. So if there are
Absolutely.
any particular queries not relatable to the topic that we are discussing, but something relating to the indirect taxes, I am open that people can raise their questions. We'll wait
Absolutely,
for
sir.
you, sir, 1 or 2 minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah, the fact that we still have 41 people after half an hour exceeding the time limit is something to note. So, audience, as I was mentioning, those of you who would like to directly ask instead of typing it on chat, you can simply use the raise hand feature or drop a yes on chat. I'll be able to enable that because this is a webinar module. We have to allow you to unmute. So that's an option from our end. So please use the raise hand feature or just drop a yes on chat. We will be able to unmute you and you can interact with the speaker.
Arpit sir, my details are going to be shared by the WebSolve people with you after the session at the time of sharing the PPT.
Yeah.
I am reachable. And another query, if operation in respective state is nil, sir, important point that I have time and again I have emphasized in the whole presentation is distribution should be always to the operational units. So I think I have answered your question.
We have Miss Neha who would like to interact, sir. I'm just going
Yeah,
to,
please.
yeah. Miss Neha, you can unmute. We have yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yes, ma'am,
Actually,
please.
as previously I asked that whether the ITC for the invoices which I have received late. Now, what happens is I have registration for about 23 states.
Hmm.
So sometimes what happens is between all the departments we receive the invoices late.
Hmm.
Like especially when it is end of the month. So we receive like till 15th.
Hmm.
So what happens is we do not record those invoices in our books, but those invoices gets reflected in our GSTR 6A.
Right.
So I was curious about knowing if I can take that ITC for distribution because
Okay.
as of 13th, those
Hmm.
invoices are not reflecting in my books.
So this is where I have asked you. See, what do you do in case of a normal registration ITC?
I
Forget
just
for time being that you just forget about the ISD and all that. A
yeah,
normal
sure.
invoice on 30th of this month, I have supplied some goods to you that you have received it in the 5th of July. So in the
Correct.
30th, my 2B, it will reflect. But for you in the July month, whether you will be in a position to take the credit?
No, I usually take it in the next month because then the
Same case here
ITC.
also, ma'am. That is why I
Okay.
told you, don't be skeptical about it, that this is of a different animal. It is just like any other tax invoice for you. ISD is also the same. So same rules apply. So in the 6A, even if it is reflecting the previous month, you can certainly take it in the next month. But what you have to keep it always in mind is a ISD starts with a 0, ends with a 0.
Like if my invoices are reflecting in GSTR 6A, I can claim only when then and when I've recorded those in my books.
Exactly, because that if your books are not recording that expenditure, but how you can avail the credit? Not possible, no.
Okay.
Right?
Just yeah, yes, sir. Thank
Same
you.
like any other supply, ma'am. There is nothing
Okay.
new about it.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you very much.
No problem. Most welcome. Yeah.
Thank you, Miss Neha. Hope your answers, you got a clarity on that. Okay, next, anyone else would like to interact? You can simply raise your hand. I think we can spend another 5 minutes, sir. That's okay. Considering we still have this many
I
people.
don't mind, sir. If people want anything to be clarified, I'm happy to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely, sir. Okay. Anyone else, audience? You can simply use the raise hand feature and we will allow you to interact. Okay. Okay. Ms. Neha, you have another question or it's the old question itself? I'm just wondering because your hands are still raised. I was wondering. Okay. Okay. Audience, anyone else? Any further questions?
Okay, one more request from my end that if you are interested in having a session on the 53rd GST Council meeting decisions and all that, we'll be happy to do that in the month of July, because the budget is on 22nd of July, but definitely the budget is not going to be of much interest for us unless somebody is interested in knowing what are the changes that are going to happen in the central excise, or because the Central Excise Act has been amended very recently, so it is going to be ratified in this budget, and then on the customs. But in the GST, no decisions are going to be made, except the decisions, whatever were made, those laws are going to be ratified in the budget session. That's it. But so budget is not going to be of much relevance as far as GST is concerned. But definitely 53rd GST Council meeting has got some important points which they have clarified. And of course, that the fine print is going to come in the ensuing days. So when we plan the session in the next month, we can cover that if more people are interested to know about it. But otherwise, that we will go by whatever the hot topics are available, or otherwise we continue our refund series. The choice is yours. So if people can give their preferences, that will help us to make these webinars which are more practical and suitable to your requirements.
Absolutely. I think, sir, we'll take a note of that. And the council
Please.
meeting, we
Yeah.
can work on that, sir. Not a
Yes,
problem.
yes.
Yeah. Audience,
So I'm
yeah.
not seeing any further questions. I don't think that we need to waste the valuable time of the remaining participants.
Right.
So from my end, I'm taking leave. On a thank you note for all those who have attended this session and interacted with their queries and all. Hope that I have answered to all of you to your satisfaction. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time and efforts, sir. We look forward to having you on our next webinar next month. And audience, thank you so much. I think the engagement was great today. And those of you who've shown interest for the demo of our solution, my team will reach out to you in the next 1 or 2 working days. And you can also expect a follow-on mailer after the webinar. You will receive the webinar deck and the entire webinar recording itself. The stream link, this was actually streamed on YouTube. You will receive the same link on the same mail. Some of you are also requested Mr. Akela's contact. We will put that on the same mail. So those of you who would like to interact with him, drop a mail, feel free to do so. On that note, I'd like to sign off. Thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you all.